Welcome to Celtic State of Mind. I'm John Dykes, and today I'm delighted to be joined by Natasha Meilkle and Lawrence Connolly to talk all things Celtic. Natasha, I was just saying before we came on, we have to keep it positive, going by the YouTube comments. Is that possible after the last 48 hours?
I mean, I see the criticism come in that we're too negative and that it's all doom and gloom, but come on, what have we got to be positive about right now? If the club want to give us something to be positive about, then we will. We'll talk about that. But what we've got to talk about right now is, unfortunately, all a bit grim. So with apologies in advance, I think this is going to be another slightly doom and gloom podcast. But what are we meant to do?
It's true. I keep saying, Natasha, I think I'm repeating myself time and time again. The narrative of this podcast is influenced by what we see, not only in the park, but what's happening off the park or what's not happening off the park. So I found it interesting, Lawrence, prior to coming on live, we were chatting about the fact that Desmond has backed Neil Lennon. We found out about this through the tabloid press and through one specific outlet in particular. So is actually this the result of the review? I'm unsure. It's a wee bit ambiguous, is it not?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we should speak to the Sun at all, but choosing to speak to the Sun over supporters, you know, it's got to be a PR fail. We talk about, a disconnect, but the club actually feel the Sun's more relevant to speak to than supporters. If they've officially announced there's got to be a review, there should be official announcement of the outcome of the review. Exactly what we're doing, where we're going forward. Has the review happened? We don't know. Do you believe what you read in the Sun?
I don't read it, to be honest, but I have seen the headline. Now, Natasha, are you taking that as the result of the review? Has the review been done following the Rangers game, and is the result just maintain a status quo? On you go, Lenny. Continue to implement this culture that you're implementing at the club.
Well, like Lauren says, I take what we read in the Sun with a pinch of salt, but if we're going by the precedent the club is setting by not properly communicating with the fans, then it would be no surprise to me if we do find out the outcome of the review through the Sun. So, to be honest, I think we do have to accept that is it. That is the decision, that the review has taken place. Whether a proper review ever took place at all is up for debate, but the outcome of the review seems to be that it is Lennon. It is Lennon for the next 6 months. And that's what we've got to deal with going forward. Again, I mean, there's only so many times we can go over old ground, but the communication with the fans here has been terrible. You can't tell us that you're conducting a review with the outcome in January and then us to find out the outcome of the review through a paper like The Sun. I mean, again, they've totally missed the feeling of the fans there, and they've not communicated properly. I mean, that's not hard. You say you're going to do a review, give us the outcome of it directly from the club to the fans. That's not difficult to get right.
No, it seems to be one thing after another. The headline on today's podcast is, where did it all go wrong? We entered this season in high spirits. We're going for a quadruple treble. We're going for 10 in a row. The season of all seasons. And even though we were in lockdowns and we're back into a lockdown and we knew we couldn't get back into stadiums, Celtic fans went out and bought the season tickets, supported the club. But it just seems to be one thing after another. Now, it was bad enough, Lawrence, and we'll get to the game because I want to hear your thoughts. I haven't spoken to yourself or Natasha about the actual game on Saturday, and we'll certainly get to that and we'll hear your thoughts. But it was bad enough trying to come to terms with, the fact that, personally, I think that's the league gone. And then we get the Dubai debacle. Then we get the fallout from that. which has obviously involved the Scottish Government. And now we have a couple of other things coming through. Desmond has backed Neil Lennon. Duffy is on his way home, but it's for personal reasons, and he's going to stay with us till the end of the season. Normally in January, Lawrence, it can be a time that reinvigorates your season. Is there anything at all that can be done by Celtic to do that? Or is it a white flag moment?
It definitely worked last year for reinvigoration. We're going to need at least 2 centre-halves in the door. Julian's out. Well, we've got Omar Colley. Is he still available? Would it be a typical getting Lenny's first choice centre-half in 6 months too late? You know, with Celtic, would it surprise us if that was the case, kind of 6 months later getting someone in? Who knows, mate? But I think if they're back in Lenny, who knows, you know, if we believe the Sun, but if they are back in Lenny, they're going to have to go to the transfer market and get some centre-halves.
This is a big issue that I have at the moment. Natasha, if you think about where Celtic are, we're in a bit of a no man's land because we've got a gaffer in charge, and even if he is, surely it's only until the end of the season. And if that's the case, we need to start planning. We need to start planning ahead. And I thought Russell made a great point yesterday talking about the appointment of Brendan Rodgers at Leicester, and it happened in February. I'm not saying they were writing off the end of the season because obviously they got almost an immediate reaction from Brendan Rodgers, but you're seeing the fruits of the labour this season. So, you know, even if Celtic were to have made moves in the January in terms of the management, Natasha, at least we would be thinking, well, you know what? There's a very, very slim chance that anything might happen this season. We're looking at a capitulation of Rangers, and I can't see it happening. However, we are planning for the season after. At the moment, I just don't think we're planning for anything. What's your kind of thoughts on that?
No, I agreed with what Russell was saying yesterday as well. It's a great point. You know, Rodgers was given 4 months, you know, to work there before pre-season. You know, 4 months to get to know his team, get to know his squad, what he needed, what he didn't need. That gave him a great pre-season to set up. And we're seeing right now how that's benefited the squad, him, the way they're playing. It's all worked because he didn't have to go in cold in pre-season or, you know, at the end of the summer to rebuild a team and work with a new squad. And he's had that 4 months where nothing was really expected of him other than to get to know a squad and a team. And that's exactly what we could have replicated here. We could have got someone else in January. Admittedly, you know, I agree with you, there's very little to play for anymore. You know, we can talk about the cup, fine, but that's it. You know, so there is very little to play for. Get someone else in, give them 4 months to sort of, you know, settle in, and then have a really good go at pre-season to put yourself in the best possible position for rebuilding for next season, because that's the position we're in now. You know, I agree with you, this season is done, but that doesn't mean we can just write off the next 6 months and accept that, you know, Lennon will stay, we'll get a couple of new players in. That's writing off 6 months for me, and I don't think we can afford to do that. I think the rebuild for next season needs to happen now, and it doesn't look like that's going to happen until the summer. And for me, we're going to end up ready to go into European qualifiers with a manager who's maybe only been in the door a few weeks.
I know, and then straight away we're kind of struggling again because, you know, if you've got those qualifiers, then we always seem to be late to the party. We're always late in bringing in the players that we need, by which time, more often than not, over the last 9 seasons, we're out the competition. And it's just really, really bad planning at the top level at Celtic. Lawrence, I know that you're a massive fan of Neil Lennon. We spoke about how we needed a reaction, we needed a run of results, and to be fair, you know, from the Lille game where we got the victory and we went on a run of wins, all of the other games, I must say, Lawrence, and I'm not taking anything away from Neil Lennon or Celtic, I would have expected Celtic to win. Then we come up against Rangers, the big one, and for an hour we look as though we're going to win. And I mean, at half-time, I was disappointed. I said at half-time I would be disappointed if we get anything less than a win at that stage. I'm going to ask you, Lawrence, where did it all go wrong at Ibrox on Saturday?
Obviously near beating. But I think before that, the ref had showed extreme leniency in the game to, you know, Morelos. But do we expect anything less from Madden? We stood and watched Morelos hit Scott Brown in the face. You know, almost the definition of violent conduct. You know, it's off the ball. He struck opposing player in the face with his arm or with his hand. And it's a yellow card. There's the rules against it, it's a red card. But I think Madden was the same guy that allowed Ryan Kent to punch Scott Brown in the face off the ball and only yellow carded him. So we've kind of got to, I know we don't expect favours from refs, but you've got to expect some kind of application of the rules, not an interpretation for the other team. What was it? Apply the rules here. The studs up challenge from Morelos. He will on Frimpong. Then he had another one later on Laxall, when Laxall wins the ball. Morelos comes in and he studs, but Morelos got the free kick. And you're starting to wonder, going, a minute, ref, how lenient are you going to be in this game? And then we get to the red card. Certainly no leniency shown there. We couldn't get the red card out quick enough.
Now, see with regards to the refereeing, and I'm always looking at the situation and trying to be as balanced as possible when it comes to that, because 99.9% of what Celtic have done wrong this season, it's been Celtic's fault. We have been the architects of our own demise, right? Now, I know COVID hasn't been kind to Celtic. Injuries certainly have not been kind to Celtic, and I take all that on board. But see, on Saturday, Lawrence, I felt, yes, after 4 minutes, I was shouting like everybody else about Morelos' challenge on Frimpong. Absolutely. And yeah, he got away with another one later on in the game with Brown, and I take that on board. I think the beat-on red card was a red card. I really do. I know that Neil Lennon came out after it and he disagreed with the decision. I also feel that Duffy's challenge was wild on Kent again, and I thought, that might be the last thing we remember of Duffy. And then when I seen the images I'm coming back from Dubai, I felt maybe they were trying to do a deal with Brighton to return him, but that's personal, and I hope everything's all right with him and his family. But again, I thought he was lenient with Sorrow. It was brought up yesterday after the video, and I didn't mention it during the thing. I was surprised Sorrow went as long as he did without a booking, I've got to say.
Yeah, could have put him earlier, but was it lenient in Duffy? He's lenient in Duffy. He's definitely been as lenient with Arfield when he's taking Ayer out when Ayer's breaking. It probably, by the time he's lenient with Duffy, the game's gone for us. We're one behind. He's making, he's given a yellow card. If it's sent Duffy off there, then you'd rewind the game and went, wait a minute, Davis has had as bad a tackle and he's only got a yellow card.
Yeah. And by the way, I don't think that's the type of player Davis is normally. I've got to say that. But yeah, Davis got away with a bad challenge as well. Natasha, see when you're looking at that, and we could argue the toss all day, Lawrence, and we're not arguing, we're talking about some of the decisions that were made, some wrong and some right. But see at that point, I still thought at that point, yeah, it's a turning point in the game. I don't think we reacted well to that, Natasha. I really don't, because I think our shape went out the window after that red card. Yeah,
I agree. The point to come back on there, I'm not entirely sure we lost the game because of that red card. That's not what changed the game or caused us to lose the game for me. You've got to take in everything that happened before that. Look at all those chances we had in the first half and we didn't convert any of them. You can't fail to convert those chances. And yes, McGregor played well and he made a few good saves, but you can't fail to capitalise on that amount of pressure and that amount of possession and that amount of chances and not score and expect to go on and win the game, because we know we're susceptible to losing goals. So, it did start before the beat on red card, which obviously didn't help us. And like you say, we then didn't help ourselves after that. I know it's been compared to the game last season, or a couple of seasons ago, where we went down to 10 and we managed to win the game. Rodgers' tactics there, he kept two up top, he took one out of the midfield, and we went for it. And that was a game, we didn't, the position we were in at the time, we didn't need to win that game. Obviously, we always want to win these derbies, but we weren't in a position at that time where Rodgers absolutely had to win that game. Lennon was at the touchline on Saturday and he had to win that game. Whatever changes he was about to make following that red card, we had to win. And, that didn't come across for me. What he seemed to be trying to do a bit of damage limitation. The substitutions didn't entirely make sense. And it just shows the difference in the manager that we have, that Rodgers was able to get a win after going down to 10 men, and Lennon didn't manage to do that, and we didn't really come close after Beaton got sent off. We didn't see the game out well. The substitutions killed us. We lost all sort of shape that was working so well, and after that it was gone, wasn't it?
It was. I've seen quite a lot of criticism coming in for several of the players as well, which, after 60 odd minutes, I thought we'd got it right. We really did, but it just all went, and you know, it was so misshapen, it was so unbalanced. We're throwing on players that you're thinking he's going on just because he's a match winner or he's a game changer. Tommy Rogic being the prime example for me. Now, when we're looking at it now though, Lawrence, and again, I don't see it as being negative. I basically says, well, this is unassailable gap now between ourselves and Rangers, and people keep reminding me we've got 3 games in hand, and I get that, I totally get that, right? And you know, there's no guarantee we're going to win the 3 games, but when we're looking at Rangers from their perspective, they've been battered by Celtic and they won. You know, they haven't looked convincing in some of the previous games, maybe against Hibs, Motherwell, St Mirren, of course, who beat them, and the game before that as well, Dundee United. But if that was us churning out those results, we'd be sitting here saying that's the mentality of a championship winning side. Do you agree with that, Lawrence? Do you think there's any way? Do you think there's any twists or turns to come between now and when the league title was handed out in May?
Let's hope so. But I mean, I agree to an extent. I wouldn't say they battered them with 3 shots on target, but let's not get carried away. And I get that they had no shots on target, even when they had 11 versus 10. But 3 shots on target for me isn't a bar. I think the 3 shots on target were from the edge or just outside the box. The deliveries from wide areas was terrible. There was one point in the first half, Frimpong, there's plenty of space. He could pick out Griffith at the back post, and I'm not actually too sure what he does, but it ends up in McGregor's arms. You know, the delivery into the forwards was terrible. So battered, 3 shots on target, all of them from outside the box. I'm not sure that's
remove the word battered and replace it with dominated then. If you want to start talking about shots on target.
Yeah. But if you want to dominate someone, you know, outside of putting shots on target, I think Rangers would have been happy with that. You know, if it's just 3 shots on target in a game. You know, if you're in the league, another team needs to win, and you've restricted them to 3 shots on target from outside the box, are you going to be really disappointed?
Well, to be honest with you, if you're going to marry it up against what Rangers did, Celtic were certainly on top for the first 60 minutes, Lawrence.
Certainly on top, but I don't think it was a huge a gulp. I think Rangers would probably be relatively happy that they've been restricting us to shots from outside the box. I don't think Lennon would be happy with the delivery from either one.
Well, the delivery from wide areas has been a massive issue all season, and we know that, you know, James Forrest is coming back, hopefully sooner rather than later. Mikey Johnson has made a few appearances, and he might give us a bit of width on the left-hand side. But beyond that, as you've said, Lawrence, the distribution from the wide areas has been really poor all season. Yet, we've said that we're not going to enter the transfer market. The only reason that we will be, according to Neil Lennon, is because Big Julien is out for 3 to 4 months, which is so disappointing to have missed him for both games against Rangers now this season. When we're looking at it, Natasha, how do you think we're going to utilise the transfer window? Because I think back to that period where I think maybe Celtic and Brendan Rodgers both knew they were going to leave. They allowed them to go into the transfer market, but bring in loan players, and it was Toljan and Burke and Weah. Do you think we're going to have a similar scenario during this window?
It's hard to tell, because that's not what we need, and it's frustrating if we are sticking with Lennon that he's then getting this really important transfer window, because, you know, he's going to be gone in 6 months. Is he really the right person to be choosing the players in this market? I don't think so. And, you know, on the other hand, if you're a player's agent right now, are you going to tell them to sign for a manager who is very likely to be gone by the next transfer window? So it's difficult. Again, it comes back to the point I would have liked to have seen us done something like get someone else in and let them have the transfer window instead of giving a transfer window to someone who is likely to be leaving. So that I think you're probably right. I think it could be some sort of shorter term loan deal, something to get us from now until the summer, and then let whoever the new manager is have the summer window to do a bit of a proper rebuild.
You know, Lawrence, it wasn't that long ago Celtic fans were outside the ground protesting. Following those protests, we were on this podcast talking about this discord, a disconnect between club and support. I don't think that's improved any. We've already spoken about how they've broken the news about how they are going to deal with Neil Lennon between now and the end of the season. With regards to when that statement came out initially, we're going to do a review in January, up to the point where this announcement has been made via the press. Do you think Neil Lennon did enough to keep his job?
Certainly, there was an improvement in results. Players come back. Change information. What's enough to keep your job? Is it if he loses the league, he's definitely out. If he's not in the wonderful league, he's definitely out of his job. I don't know what criteria Celtic could put in place. If they were going to do a review, they must have had some criteria they were going to review it against. Obviously, it's a bit of a secret. But has he done enough to keep his job? It's down to Desmond, isn't it?
I know, but what's your thought? What's your thoughts, Lawrence?
I can't see he's changing anyone. We're all on a break to Dubai. I think he's staying until the end. And you know what? I'm not entirely convinced that he'll be gone in the summer. If they haven't made the change now,
we'll try to keep this positive, Lawrence.
Yeah, if they haven't made the change now, what's convincing you that they would make the change in the summer?
I got a really positive text yesterday, actually, from someone who's pretty close to certain people at the club, saying that he expected Desmond to pull a rabbit out of the hat on this one. And, that just blew the wind out of my sails when I seen the headline that, Lenny's been backed. But let's go back to Dubai, or not. Maybe we shouldn't have gone to Dubai in the first place. And we've seen the pictures now. Natasha, we know that the club have gone through all the different protocols, and it was all the football authorities as well as the Scottish Government authorities as part of the joint response group. Everything was A-OK. It's turned into a bit of a shambles, isn't it?
Yeah, having approval from the relevant authorities, fine. It makes a bit of a mockery of the government then coming out and criticising us going if they've actually approved it. But for me, that's sort of by the by. The fact that we're there in the first place is inexcusable for me. It's, to be honest, it's insulting to the fans to see those pictures that we did for the trip to have went ahead. Again, we go over it so many times, like how big can the disconnect be? How more disillusioned can you get with your club? And then all of a sudden, you're sitting there on a Monday following a defeat that essentially ends the 10 in a row campaign. We've been put into another lockdown. Everyone's feeling relatively miserable, and we see a squad who have continually let us down over the season, having drinks by the pool in Dubai. And I get that they have days off, and I don't have any issue with them having a beer on their day off, but it's tone deaf, isn't it? To be sitting at a nice hotel by a pool in Dubai having a beer after that result at the weekend, and the life that people and 60,000 season ticket holders are living back here. It's very insensitive and a complete PR disaster for me.
It is. We've spoken about the PR quite a few times this season, and I think it is a PR disaster. It's up there with the Christmas jerseys advert coming out just in December there. Now, it's all about knowing your audience. What I've also been thinking about is there's a huge amount of pressure, obviously, on Celtic at the best of times. Don't you think that what's happened with the Dubai and the fallout is just going to add even more scrutiny and more pressure on this side? Because we were playing at Hibs on Monday night. We're playing Hibs on Monday night. What happens if we play atrociously? Because we're all just going to start looking at the Dubai trip and the failure to prepare, and you have just been on a jolly. So don't you think it's had a totally counterproductive response? I mean, when you think about the famous picture of Scott Brown with the kebab, right? And this was under Ronnie Dyler, wasn't it? And Kebab Gate. And it showed that there was a group, or there was an element within that squad that were undermining the boss. Now, this time round, the boss is part of it. So we're speaking about a culture, and Lenny had said that maybe we need to change the culture. And I'm thinking, well, I was quite happy with the culture before, the one that was implemented after Lenny left, and that was through Ronnie's time and then Brendan Rodgers' time. And I just feel that we've gone backwards in that respect. Now, when you're looking at the players who've been photographed, etc., I can't see Edouard in there. I can't see Ayer in there getting involved in that kind of thing. They must be looking at themselves and thinking, I want a bigger platform here. This isn't what I'm kind of aiming for in terms of my career. So first and foremost, Natasha, do you think it puts added pressure on Celtic on Monday night?
It does, yeah, because, the only excuse we're getting for this is that, these trips in the past have acted as a catalyst to, ignite a season and go on and have great performances and a really winning run. And that really is the only justification for doing this. So if that doesn't happen, then the trip's been a total disaster. If the performances don't come from after it and they've annoyed the fans, and if it's been a huge PR issue, and if they've annoyed the government and then there's no results, then there is absolutely no positive from this trip. So they need to try and find some positive, some way of explaining it and some way of almost excusing it. And that is by going on a really good run. And if that doesn't happen, then I don't know what you say to that.
The following day, and I think everybody predicted this, we were served up some pictures of the guys training really hard in the Dubai sun. And you actually seen it coming, didn't you, Lawrence? And you start thinking to yourself, do they actually care what we think anymore? Do they care about the fans? That's the way I'm feeling at this present moment.
To be honest, Dubai seems to be a regular thing. Where we go. You talk about culture under Brendan Rodgers. I remember the last Rodgers trip to Dubai. Scots and players, and the players having pints in their first day. So if you're saying it's a cultural thing, having pints, what happened under Rodgers' pints at Dubai? You've also got to remember this is the players' first day off since the festive period. We had Christmas day off and playing the next day. So is it because they're having a pint, or is it because of?
It's contextual. It's contextual, though, Lawrence.
There didn't seem a big outcry when the trip was announced. People said we shouldn't go. We actually went before lockdown was announced, before we went into the more strict lockdown. So I didn't hear any cry amongst Celtic fans when they should be cancelling that Dubai trip this year when they announced it.
There was quite a few people with concerns.
Yeah, I think people were generally of the opinion that it's irresponsible and a bad look for the club to be going to Dubai during a pandemic. We're the same club that are complaining about our players going on international duty and catching COVID there, and all of a sudden we decide it's okay to take them to a hotel and mix with members of the public and, take a long flight over there. I don't think we can have it both ways. I don't think we can complain about international duty and then take them all to Dubai. They're going to mix with people there, I'm sure. I just, regardless of the situation, we shouldn't be going to Dubai right now. And it's hard to compare it to what Rodgers did and how successful it was in previous years, because it's not the same season. It's completely different. We're 19 points behind and the country's in lockdown. I mean, it's completely different in both aspects.
I just think the contextual factors now, as you say, are completely different. But Lawrence, what you're saying there, if you're winning, and you see a player having a pint, then it is different. Of course it is, because we're not winning. And we've had the season from hell. So
the pints isn't a cultural thing. So
no, I think that's part of it. Well, winning's a culture, but how you get there is based on behaviours, isn't it, and attitudes. And I just don't think, for me, that we have the same professionalism that we had. And one of the points I made yesterday, Lawrence, and I'd be keen to hear your thoughts on this, I don't think Celtic are fit. I really don't. I mean, I was sitting at the Scottish Cup final at half-time thinking, we're going to win this 3-4-0. In fact, I felt the same a few times this season at half-time. And we've been talking all season about that was a good 30 minutes, that was a good 45 minutes. First game against Lille, it was a good 60 minutes. We've had very few good 90-minute performances. And I think that comes down to fitness, which is part of the culture of the club. You've got to be ultra fit.
I think that's why Griff had to come on. He looked done, didn't he?
A few of them did, yeah. A few of them did on Saturday, got to say.
I think since Jim McGuinness has left, the team's looked as fit. And he's over, I think it's Galway he's managing now, after his spell in the States. But yeah, we certainly don't look as fit as we were when I think Desmond had a hand in bringing him in as well from Donegal. He was managing their Gaelic team. We definitely don't look as fit as we were when he was running the fitness side of the first team. So it's definitely something that's needing addressed.
I would say so.
Are we going to spend money on fitness coaches? I don't know, but
well, I think that you've got to get that framework and you've got to have the foundations right, and because then you can bring in a £5 million player like Ajeti and he looks very ordinary because he needs to be playing in the correct system. And I mean, quite a few of our players, I think, that were brought in have looked pretty ordinary. We obviously have shelled out quite a few £1 million on the new additions, even the guys that are in on loan, and the big one being Shane Duffy. And I've seen a lot of tweets recently saying, imagine giving that wage to a new manager. Because, to be honest with you, I think no matter who you are, in terms of a player, you need managed properly, you need coached properly, and I don't think you were seeing that. There's been an element of fortune about the changes that were made, Lawrence. I don't think Neil Lennon wanted to drop Scott Brown. I don't think he wanted to play Sorrow and Turnbull, but there was an element of us playing a dead rubber game in Europe and throwing in a couple of guys for a bit of game time. And lo and behold, it worked. The goalkeeper situation, people are saying last night, Foster clipped a clean sheet against Liverpool. This is where it all started to go wrong. I don't think so. I just think that's one element of a myriad of issues that Celtic have had throughout this season, of all seasons. But being a realist on one hand, but also never ever willing to give up, I still think we need to use the January transfer window. We need to know how much would Neil Lennon have in terms of a say in the players that come in anyway. He's not going to have the final say, Natasha. So I'm still looking at January. I'm still looking at, what do we do here? Do we try and cut our losses on guys like Duffy? Can we? Is that an option in the deal? Because I would be certainly looking at that. We need at least one centre-half, maybe two. We need a right back. We need some width. Are we going to lose someone like Edouard, Christie? I think Shams checked out. I wouldn't cry any tears over him leaving. Rogic, is he surplus to requirements now that Turnbull has started to show his true worth to the club? Do you still think we're going to try? And I don't think we can salvage the league, but we are going to have to try and start rebuilding now for the summer.
I'm just not sure that January is the market to do that in. It's always a difficult market, and we're in just such a position of uncertainty. It's hard to rebuild from that. I know it has to start somewhere, so why not now? And I think there'll certainly be a few players who see the writing on the wall, who see the way the next 5 months is going to go, and will want out as soon as possible. And that will be January. Your Chams and your Edwards. More recently, I'm probably going to take Ayer off that list. I think he'll stay till the summer now. I think Al-Hamid will stay till the summer now, given the position with Julian. But I think it's an important January, and it could see some of the biggest movement that we have in a while as we start to look to rebuild. But I just don't think we'll get as much done as we hope we will in this market, unfortunately. I think, maybe a new centre-half, maybe two, but maybe a right back, but I don't see too much more than that.
Now, Lawrence, we're looking at a situation that's really tough in January to be looking at all the competition we've entered so far. We're out of the Europa League, we're out of the Champions League, the League Cup. I would say we're out of the league. It's not mathematically impossible yet, but, I think it's gone. There's 4 competitions out of 5. We're definitely out of 3 of them. Come the end of the season, if that's the case, we might win the Scottish Cup, we may not. Either way, it's been a disastrous season. Right, and I would challenge anybody to argue that. Could that be something that prompts the people in charge of Celtic to make a move as big as the move they made? Because Kevin Graham doesn't think it is as big as the move that we made to bring in someone of the level of Brendan Rodgers to completely change the culture of the club and the professionalism of the club, and actually start to look like a club that wants to compete, not just domestically, but also in Europe. Because at the moment, that's not where we are. We're miles off of that.
You talked about Desmond and rabbits out of hats earlier. So I was reading that Alex Ferguson got offered double his wages at one point before we got Wim in to come manage Celtic. I touched on Desmond's been involved in Martin O'Neill, he's been involved in Brendan Rodgers. It really, I suppose, depends on what Dermot wants to do, doesn't it? That's where we are. How he views things, if he wants to make the decision and bring in a big name, it's down to him. But transfer window, I'm thinking it might be a bit different this January. There's a few players we want to get out. We might not get the money we want because of COVID. But on the flip side, there might be other clubs desperate for money because of COVID. So it might be, there's different economics at play in this transfer window from previous ones. I think we need a couple of centre-halves in, and then that allows us to play higher at right back. we're so short at centre half. I think it'd be crazy to send Duffy back just now. We're talking 4 or 5 months of the season left. Sending Duffy back with problems at centre half, I don't think's the right idea. I think he was too similar to Julian, but Julian's out, so maybe Duffy's going to perform better if he's got a centre half next to him that can actually play the sweeper role. They can tuck in behind him. I don't know, but sending him back just now when it's a position we're short of, definitely not. Charm, yeah, definitely get rid of Charm. We've got a few players going into the last 18 months, their contract. So it may be that, Christie maybe want to move, I don't know. But yeah, there's a few players that can move. The big one's Eddie. Another disappointing show against Rangers. I'm not too sure how bothered he was in that game. And it's probably one of the biggest reasons that their season hasn't went as smoothly as we thought it was going to go. He's undoubtedly the most talented forward in Scotland. Have we even get 20 minutes out of him this season? We've
had flashes, I think. Again, I think that comes down to the economics, Lawrence, that you've already mentioned. Celtic want to get some kind of value under the circumstances if they were to cash in on someone like Edouard, because 12 months down the line, when he's scoring goals like Dembele scoring goals in France, or if he goes down to England, we may rue selling him on the cheap or the relative cheap. Now, Natasha, I've asked you the question before, what happens after we lose the 10? Should we lose the 10? And like myself, you said you'll still be going to the games, you'll still support the football club. But what I have seen a lot of, particularly online and on social media, is a lot of fans saying, I'm done, because of this disengagement. Not because we're not winning. It's not just because we're not winning. It's all the other elements, how this is being dealt with. Do you fear that come the end of the season we might be in that situation? And as I was saying to Lawrence before, it may actually prompt a reaction by the decision makers at Celtic.
Yeah, all I can say is I hope they've kept the banners from the Daily years, because I think we will be heading that way if they don't do anything fast. I've seen a lot of it as well. People saying, why should I renew? And it's something Lawrence touched on earlier. It's like, do they care about us? And it's not for a football club to care about the fans like that in some extent, but in another extent it is. They are meant to care. They're meant to be doing this for us. It's our club. And the way they're treating us is off-putting. It is. There's no respect. Like we've already touched on, some of what's been going on is insulting. And it comes back to, they're not in there for us. Why should we be there for them? Personally, it's not changed my view too much. I'm still planning on renewing, but I can totally understand the people who aren't. And I think the club needs to go on some sort of charm offensive to turn that position around. And at the moment, they're doing the exact opposite. The Dubai trip is the opposite of trying to win the fans back over. It's pushing more and more away. And again, it's just so disengaging. So they need to do something. Is that going to be some marquee January signings? Is it going to be a marquee manager? But for me, I think what they're most likely to do is get to around about season ticket renewal time and tell us, stick with us, change is coming. They'll blame this season on the fact that we weren't there. They'll say how much they need us back. Promise us something good on the horizon, and that's the carrot at the end of the stick that gets you to renew, and they'll use that against us, and then a couple of months down the line there will be no magic waiting to happen. But that's where I see it going.
Now, that's quite a realistic. I thought you were going to say, and then they'll unveil Roy Keane as a new manager. That was going to be the end of that. Lawrence, I'm going to ask you one final question before we move on to some of the great comments that are coming through from YouTube, Twitter and Facebook. And it's on the inconsistencies that you feel have been evident when Celtic are being dealt with, if you like, from the authorities. You've spoken in the past about the authorities of Scottish football, but now it's an issue with the Scottish government, and you've got some concerns about that.
Yeah, if you look under Paul and Holly, government's quick to come out, stop us from playing a couple of matches, which hasn't helped us this season. Fairly critical of the club. If you want to look at the south side of the city, very first day back at training, Stephen Gerrard was sharing his car in contravention of regulations. No comment from the government, no action taken from the football authorities. They decided to go ahead and play a game without COVID tests being back in. No action from the authorities, no condemnation from the government. Surprisingly, a little number of players at a party, only 2 turned up at a party, and the guy whose birthday it wasn't there apparently. Those kind of parties. Maybe he's really unpopular and he had to have his party by himself. But they broke the law. The police had to get involved, and they were praised by the Scottish Government. It would appear that double standards. The government now have agreed to going on a trip, haven't followed all the protocols, and now come out and condemn us for it. And John Swinney's doubled down on the combination. It's not good leadership. So I think he's a current Justice Secretary. And this is a government who previously had a Justice Secretary who described 90 minutes of sectarian bile at Hampden, from Rangers fans, as a great advert for the Scottish game. We talk about Celtic being toned down. We've got a Justice Secretary that thinks sectarian sound from 90 minutes is a great advert for the game, or had at that point in time. Didn't have to resign over that, but nothing as crazy as that. Even if we look at the players when they arrived at Ibrox, taking sectarian abuse.
Yes.
Not a big crowd that the police could have lifted them. I don't know how they're going to identify them now, given that they were masked up. It didn't seem to have too much issue with the abuse getting shouted at Celtic fans, sectarian abuse. If that had been racist abuse, I'm sure it would have made the front pages. If that had been Meilkle fans down south shouting racist abuse, it would have been, Good Morning Britain or whatever it is these days, would have been chatting about it. Just acceptable in Scotland. And 2 days later, the police are going to conduct an investigation. Well, is that the speedy response? Your officers were present. Within touching distance of the people that were perpetrating the crime. Is that how you tackle crime? Allow it to happen. We won't have any crime prevention. We won't act on the spot. We'll wait a couple of days. We'll get a complaint from the offended party, and we'll look into that. Yeah, it's just completely unacceptable. But I think it's a wider problem in Scottish society. The fact that the police think it's acceptable, and that's how they carry out their job. It's just saying abuse of Celtic players. That's fine.
The thing is, we talk about issues. So, for example, I wasn't happy with the overall display by the officials on Saturday, but you take it on the chin that X, Y and Z was done correctly. And similarly, Natasha, when we're talking about the Dubai trip, we've already said, it was the wrong thing for Celtic to do, but they did follow all correct protocols. So were you surprised at the reaction from the Scottish Government yesterday?
Yeah, absolutely. When I first read the Scottish Government spokesperson coming out and saying that, I assumed that we hadn't had the trip sanctioned and was concerned. But the fact that, we clearly went through all the right channels, got the trip approved, the Scottish Government then can't surely be in a position to come out and criticise a trip that they have sanctioned. And again, I'm not going down, any form of conspiracy line, but Lawrence has touched on it. Why does it seem to be that they are coming down so heavily handed on one club, like they did when it was Bolingoli? We were called out extremely by the government. And again, with this trip, we've been called out specifically again in a way that I don't think other clubs' breaches have been. And particularly when it appears that they have followed the relevant rules. I think this is particularly unfair. We've already said, we don't agree with the trip, and whether legally it's right and morally it's right are completely different positions. If the trip's been approved, they flew out before lockdown. I don't really know why the government want the SFA to investigate this. And if the SFA do investigate this, what are they proposing they do about it? Are we having an investigation? Are there going to be sanctions? What is the expected outcome here? I didn't understand the need for that statement at all.
No, definitely. It's not been a dull week being a Celtic fan, that's for sure. And let's have a look at some comments coming in from fellow Celts. Patrick Murphy on YouTube. Progress was to be reviewed this month. We're worse off than when that announcement was made. Sticking with Neil Lennon isn't surprising because it's clear board don't know who to turn to. We're going nowhere. Lawrence, there's a kind of train of thought whereby the board did have a backup plan. They did have a plan B, but they can't implement it until the end of the season. If that's the case, would it not be better for them to come out and maybe give us a wee bit more information? Or would that be just hanging Neil Lennon out to dry?
Well, if that's the plan, football's a small place, I'm sure Lenny would know that. Hanging him out to dry in what respect? But the problem is, I think the problem is the board, and specifically, the way the football club's structured at the moment. You don't have the football manager having a final say. In football issues, you don't have him picking his back team. You don't have him. We don't get his first transfer targets in. We've been through it before. His number 3, Ivan Toney didn't come in. Omar Colley didn't come in. You can run through his transfer targets. His number 1 targets. He didn't get them. The problem is the board, and if we're looking for this board to act, I think it needs changed. I think David Lowe's touched on it and Jim Orr's touched on it. It almost appears the job for boys at the board level. We have guys at gravitas, John Reid, whether you think he should be at the club or not because his previous position as Home Secretary, or Brian Quinn, former Governor of Bank of England. You had real heavyweight guys that, would have. I thought that the Celtic statement to the government was pretty weak, and the action that they taken on us earlier, I think, would have been challenged. It'd certainly been challenged under McCann. I think we more or less sit back and take this. I thought Celtic statement was weak, to be honest. I think you should be calling out the government a lot more and putting out in the statement exactly what is your agenda here. If you've agreed to everything, why are we calling out, as Natasha said, if you want investigation, to what purpose?
No, I agree with you, Lawrence, I do, but I'm going to pick up on one of the things you said. You're breaking up a wee bit there, Lawrence, sorry. You were saying there the influence of the board on footballing matters. So I'm going to ask you, Natasha, when you're looking at, and we know that it's not Neil Lennon or indeed the manager's decision in terms of who comes in, when it's a transfer window. We've heard it from Brendan Rodgers. Famously, when he was talking about Sved, it was almost as if he didn't know anything about the boy, yet he was the manager of the football club. So we understand that in modern football, that does seem to be the way. And even at Liverpool, I spoke to the guys at the Anfield Wrap and they spoke about how, the manager does identify players and can push for certain players, but they're also presented with players that have been identified by a scouting and a recruitment network, whereby they think that would be good business for the club. And so it happens, and we understand that, but it does appear as though at Celtic it's far more prevalent. So not picking your backroom team if you're the manager. How on earth can you make something work when you've not identified the skills and abilities, and indeed your ability to work with that team? And then you're looking at the situation with Barkas, and this is before a veer into conspiracy kind of territory, right? But all of a sudden Barkas is thrown back in. Well, he was always our number 1. I don't think he's ever shown anything in a Celtic jersey to suggest that he is a number 1. And then I start thinking to myself, well, is Lennon under pressure to play the £5 million goalie that we've invested so much money in? And then I start concerning myself with, what if we do try and bring in someone of a higher calibre in terms of a manager, and they look at the constraints and the way that Neil Lennon's had to work under Peter Lawwell and co, and the way that Brendan Rodgers left the club? Is it becoming so damaging that it's going to be more and more difficult to attract someone at that kind of level?
Yeah, it could be. And there doesn't seem to be anyone on the horizon who's jumping to take the job at the level that we'd be looking for. And like you've identified, why would they? There's clearly issues between the management having the say they want, as we've seen with Lennon and Rodgers. There's the issue that, we are in a terrible position right now. In terms of the league, in terms of the connection with the fans, in terms of the squad that we've got, the players looking to lead, who we're going to get in. It's not an attractive job. But in some ways, Lennon has been backed by the board. He has been given money to spend. He managed to spend $5 million on a goalkeeper. We got in players on big wages like El Younousi. They let him keep high value assets like Edward and Ayer. So he has been backed to an extent, but the problem, I think, is more control. Whose decisions are those? And managers want control, so they don't just want backed financially. They want to have the say over where that money's going. So I think if we really are to attract someone of a high calibre like Rodgers, or someone in or near that sphere, then the board needs to have a bit more of a think about how much control that individual's going to get, because no one at that standard is going to come in without being guaranteed the control that they want.
No, you're spot on there. I was watching Pochettino's first training session at PSG and thinking back to his name popping up time and time again on this podcast, and thinking to myself, we need to really lower our kind of aims when it comes round to the point of appointing a manager. Then you look at someone like Davy Moyes, and everybody's screwing their face up at Davy Moyes. Look at the job he's doing at West Ham. So there's a lot of managers out there who may not be the box office name that a lot of Celtic fans want, but they will come in and do a much better job than what's being done at the moment. There's an interesting point coming through from Tommy R on YouTube. Mowbray and Barnes got shown the door for less. Just shows it pays to be Celtic minded. Now, the reason I'm bringing it up is because obviously we had, famously or infamously, we had John Barnes interviewed on a Celtic State of Mind last year, and he was of the view that he was given less time because of his colour, because of his race, and that's what he said, and he was given less time for that, and he's continued to back that argument up since the interview, and it's an interesting take on things, because I think Neil Lennon has remained where he is due to his affiliation with the club and his affiliation with a large part of the support. Joe Porter comes in to say it truly goes from bad to worse. What the hell are Celtic Football Club playing at? It's like watching someone descend into madness. Yes, and Joe, we need to come on every single day and discuss that madness. And Mark McKinnon, we've now entered the twilight zone, out of the Champions League and Europa League in embarrassing fashion, which it was, out of the League Cup in embarrassing fashion, 19 points behind Rangers, and Lennon is still on a job. It's wild. This is why I sometimes think, am I giving them too much credit, Lawrence, to think that, do they have a rabbit in a hat moment where they're going to, because I think they're going to be forced into a corner, like Natasha said before, when they're looking at the renewals coming in very slowly, and they're looking at a situation where, are we going to even hit 30,000 season tickets for next season? They need to do something to reinvigorate the interest in the club.
But let's be honest, Desmond in the past, he's trying to get Alex Ferguson. He delivered the Neil, he delivered Rodgers. He's definitely got in him to pull something out. Interestingly, we pulled out the Atlantic League. I would think there's got to be something going on in the background if I pulled out of that. So I don't know if it's going to be what football's going to be looking like post-COVID, and many clubs across Europe are going to survive. I think it could be back to 34,000 season ticket holders if they don't.
Oh, definitely. Now, Mr. Briggs makes the point, we would have had no chance of getting him. That was pure fantasy stuff. But there are other managers' names who pop up pretty regularly. Rafa Benitez being another one from Hugh Jameson would be great, but probably out of our price range. There's a lot of managers out there, Natasha, whereby they're already multi-millionaires and they're out of jobs, they're out of work. And yes, we know that Rafa's making a lot of money elsewhere at this moment in time, but it's all about the world's aligning, and that's what happened when Brendan Rodgers was available. He had to get his foot back on the ladder because he obviously wanted to get back into the English league, and I think it's probably key at this stage to remember that there may come an opportunity that at the moment isn't there, whereby we do have that elite manager, or that box office name that we can bring in to do the job. Because a lot of these names, it seems fantasy. Would Brendan Rodgers have seemed fantasy 2 months before he was appointed? I think perhaps. I remember speaking about the possibility of that and people laughing at me. I think he was 50-1 initially when the odds started coming out with Brendan Rodgers, being appointed. It all depends on the circumstances, and there's so many names out there now. I'm going to ask you, Natasha, Kevin Graham is now resigned to the fact that we're going to appoint Jack Ross. Is that the level of manager that you believe can take Celtic forward?
No, I see where he's coming from, and I see that it's looking like quite a likely outcome. But it depends where we want to be as a football club. If we want to be challenging domestically and always fighting for first or second, and accept that that's the way it's going to be, and that European football of any form is a bonus, then maybe a manager like Jack Ross would do the job. But for me, that's not where I want the club to be, and I want to see the club striving to be better than that, and I don't think it's out of reach. So I feel like a manager like Jack Ross is settling a bit, and I don't want the club to settle. And in fact, it would be criminal to settle from the position of strength that we were in, to not build on that, but to go backwards and settle for this will do is frustrating. I think we can do better.
Yeah, I mean, it's no disrespect to Jack Ross. I've watched his career with interest, and I do rate him. I regard him really highly. But I think there's a level that managers can get to. And I don't think Jack Ross has got the cutting edge to be this Celtic manager where every game is a must-win. He's never been in a job where every game's a must-win. I also think that the Sunderland job probably came too early, so it probably would have followed the Hibs job if there was a perfect alignment of his managerial career. And down there, and I keep saying this, he had 19 1-1 draws, which goes back to this cutting edge that I don't think he's got as a manager. And I do like him, and I think he's going to be a very competent manager in Scottish football, and he might get another move down to England. Lawrence, if the moment comes where Neil Lennon is relieved of his duties, and I know that you would rather he stayed because you're a big fan, what kind of level are we looking at? Because I mentioned Davy Moyes. Probably on a few occasions Moyes was gettable. I know that he's been interviewed for the job. I remember speaking to him once when he was up in Scotland, and he said that he does see himself managing in Scotland at some stage. And I don't know if that is the national team or Celtic. He certainly wouldn't go to any other club in Scotland, I wouldn't have thought.
I think we need to kind of remodel what we do with managers and base it on in Brendan. So if we say to players, listen, come here, there's a chance for you to develop to go one of the top sides in Europe. Look, what was it, £9 million compensation we got for Brendan?
Yes.
Really bring in almost paid for himself. It's really bringing in a manager of that status with the idea of selling him on. Someone buying out his contract eventually. I think that would make the proposition and the business case for bringing in a higher level manager a lot easier. Gordon Strachan's touched on it. There's maybe 3 years at a club. He thinks is the limit. A lot of managers tend to move on. It's unusual for a manager to stay anywhere long term. So I think we should be looking at top level, but with the idea of going, well, look, if you come here, you're putting yourself in the shop window in the UK. You could be getting one of the top six down south. So you had Agnelli at Juventus. He's not doing anything. Why wouldn't you talk to him? If you're going to recruit, why wouldn't you speak to the best of the market and see what they want, see what their aspirations are, see how you can match it?
The big thing for me,
rule people out.
The big thing, yeah. But we've got previous for that, Natasha, don't we? Because Peter Lawwell admitted that there was applications the last time round, yet Lenny was the man. We didn't even look at them.
That's just negligent, isn't it?
Yep.
We've been over that. We've been over how we feel about that. Negligent, and look where it got us. So I think we do perhaps need to cast the net a bit wider and maybe look at the people who are available and who are interested, rather than just deciding on someone and going with it. So maybe that's what they're going to take the next few months to do if Lennon's staying in the job. Maybe they're going to wait on the right person. Maybe they're going to look at more people this time round, which would be a good thing. Or maybe we've identified the person and they're not available until June. Who knows? That could come into play as well.
No, I think it does certainly look like that, but it also looks as though the club would have been maybe quite right in their thinking to say, well, we've given you enough, Lenny, to win this league this season. So get on with that because we've got something lined up for the summer. And to be honest, it's just turned into a complete disaster because for any number of reasons that we've discussed time and time again, Smiddy boy, Jack Ross has a good future in the game, but it would be another Mowbray type risk. I agree with that, actually, and I do think Jack Ross is a very, very good manager in actual fact. And Jack Carlo on YouTube says, will Michael O'Neill be available in the summer? I think O'Neill's had a good run at it as a manager just about wherever he's been. And the other name that keeps coming up is Eddie Howe. Again, it's one of these ones, if you ask the question, then he's out of work. You look at the previous that we've had, the last two managers have been out of work. If that's where we're looking, we could employ him right now. Who knows what the future holds in terms of the manager, but we will continue to comment on on it blow by blow, because there's been plenty of blows in the last few weeks. We come up against Motherwell on Monday. Natasha and Lawrence, hopefully you'll be back with us on the Tuesday to describe, hopefully, a victory over Hibs, and we'll see where Celtic are at that moment in time. Thanks everybody for getting involved. If you are on YouTube, please subscribe to the channel. We are growing and broadcasting on a daily basis. But all that's left for me to say is Lawrence Connolly, Natasha Meilkle, thank you very much for joining me on a Celtic State of Mind.